She walked into the room with quiet steps, her fingers still smelling faintly of vegetables from the market. Dressed in a simple cotton dress and worn sandals, she looked completely out of place in the grand hall filled with polished wood, velvet, seats, and proud musicians tuning their prized instruments. No one gave her more than a passing glance, no one except the elite violinist who had just challenged the room with a smirk and a single sentence. "Anyone here think they can play better than me?" He was a world-renowned talent, known for his fiery performances and sharper ego. The piece he was about to perform was legendary, one of the hardest violin compositions ever written, known to break even seasoned performers. His challenge was met with silence, until the quiet woman, clutching an old, scratched violin case, slowly raised her hand. The room laughed. Some out of nervousness, some out of genuine disbelief. But she said nothing, just opened her case, gently lifted her violin, and nodded. With a mixture of curiosity and annoyance, the violinist allowed it. After all, he thought, it would be entertaining to watch her fumble. But then the first note left her instrument, and something shifted. Heads turned, the mocking smiles faded. Every bow stroke she played pulled the room deeper into silence. Her hands moved with a grace no one expected from a woman no one knew. And when she finished, when the final note trembled in the still air, the elite violinist could only stare. Then he stood, walked over to her, and in a voice much softer than before, asked a question no one ever thought they'd hear from him. What made this simple woman play like that? And why, in that moment, did the master become the student? One knew her name, not the other musicians, not the audience, not even the violinist she had just stunned into silence. She didn't offer it either. She simply packed up her instrument, gave a small nod, and turned to leave. But the elite violinist wasn't done. He stepped in front of her, still reeling from what he'd just witnessed. "Wait," he said, more. Breath, then voice. "Who are you?" She paused. For a moment, it looked like she might answer. But instead, she just smiled, soft, tired, and a little sad, and said, "I'm just someone who plays." That wasn't enough. It couldn't be. The man who had traveled the world, performed for royalty, and judged international competitions, now found himself completely unprepared for the mystery standing before him. Her technique was flawless, but more than that, her playing had emotion, depth, a story behind every note. It was the kind of music that couldn't be taught in a conservatory or mastered. Through endless hours in a rehearsal room, he followed her outside. She didn't seem surprised. The street was buzzing with life cars, chatter, distant music, but around them, it felt still. "How do you play like that?" he asked. "Who taught you?" She didn't answer directly. She just looked up at him and said, "Sometimes music doesn't come from training. Sometimes it comes from surviving." Those words stayed with him. Who was this woman who played the world's hardest piece like she'd written it herself? How had someone with no fame, no following, and no stage managed to leave even the great virtuoso speechless? As she disappeared into the crowd, violin case swinging gently at her side, one thing was clear: this was no ordinary musician. And the elite violinist had only just scratched the surface of her story. He couldn't let it go. The elite violinist, once hailed as a prodigy, worshipped by critics, followed by millions, was haunted. Not by failure, but by something far worse: mystery. He replayed that performance in his mind, over and over. Her tone, her phrasing, the way she bent each note with emotion no textbook could explain. It didn't make sense. How could someone so unknown, so ordinary, hold that much power in her playing? He started asking around. No one at the event knew who she was. No registration, no background, not even a name. Just a face, a sound, and a performance that rewrote everything he thought he knew about mastery. A few days later, he found himself standing in a quiet part of the city, the market district. It was a different world than his own. Here, violin cases were replaced by shopping bags, and music meant street performers playing for spare change. And then he heard it again. Faint, almost drowned out by city noise, but unmistakable. She was there, sitting on a low stool outside a bakery, playing the same old violin. People passed her by, some dropping coins, others barely noticing. He watched from across the street, trying to make sense of it. Why would someone who could silence an entire concert hall choose to play in the shadows? He approached her again. But this time, a child tugged at her sleeve. "Mama," the girl whispered, "is he going to take you away?" The violinist froze. So did he. A mother. Now the pieces shifted. Her hands told a story of practice, yes, but also labor. Her eyes carried music, but also something deeper loss, perhaps, or maybe something she left behind. And now he wasn't just chasing a mystery, he was standing in the middle of it. A woman with a gift that rivaled the greatest, yet chose to remain invisible. Why? He wanted answers. But the more he searched, the more the lines blurred between genius and sacrifice, ambition and survival. And just when he thought he was getting close, someone else began watching him. For weeks, he kept returning to that same spot. Sometimes she was there, sometimes she wasn't. When she played, crowds would gather without realizing why, drawn by something they couldn't name. Still, she never said more than a few quiet words. Her daughter stayed close, always watching. And the elite violinist, once untouchable in his world, was now just another face in the crowd. He started to learn pieces of her story in fragments. A retired shopkeeper mentioned seeing her years ago playing outside a hospital, tears streaming down her face. A music store owner swore she came in once asking for cheap strings, her hands shaking like she hadn't eaten in days. Slowly, a picture began to form. Not of a failed artist, but someone who had hidden her brilliance on purpose. Someone who had run from something, or maybe someone. Then came the night of the gala, a major Music Foundation announced a once-in-a-lifetime performance, the most difficult violin piece ever composed, to be played by select masters from around the world. The elite violinist had already been chosen to open the event, but something inside him had changed. He declined. Instead, he sent a message to the organizers. "There is someone else you need to hear. She plays like the music comes from her soul." They didn't believe him. Not until he sent a recording, one he'd secretly taken during her street performance. Within hours, phones were ringing. Offers were made, but she didn't respond. She vanished. No one at the market had seen her. Her usual bench stood empty. Even the bakery owner said she hadn't come by for bread. And then, a note appeared, slipped under his door. No name. No return address. Just 7 words, written in rushed handwriting. They know. I can't hide anymore. Who was watching her? Why was she hiding? And what danger had his curiosity brought to her door? He stared at the note, heart pounding, knowing he had pushed too far. But it was too late now. The music had already started. To pull everything, fame, fear, past and present, into a storm no one could stop. The note sat in his hands long after the sun had gone down. He read it over and over, searching for something more, clues, meaning, anything. They know. I can't hide anymore. Who were they? What had she been running from all this time? And why did a woman with such extraordinary talent seem more afraid of being seen than forgotten? The elite violinist couldn't sleep. The next morning, he went back to the street where she used to play. Her spot was still empty, but this time, a man was standing there, tall, sharp-eyed, dressed in a dark coat that didn't belong to the warmth of the season. He wasn't looking for bread or music. He was watching. They locked eyes for a moment. The man gave a faint nod, as if acknowledging something unspoken. Then he walked away without a word. The violinist stood frozen, pulse racing. It wasn't just about music anymore. Something else was tangled in her silence, something dangerous. Later that day, a private message appeared in his inbox. No name, no subject, just an audio file. He hesitated, then played it. It was a scratchy recording, Anne. Argument, voices raised in another language, and then her voice, unmistakable, pleading. A man yelling, a crass. Then the sound of a violin being smashed against a wall. He paused the audio. Sick to his stomach, she hadn't just walked away from a career. She had escaped something. Something that left scars deeper than any bad review or failed concert. And now, his attempt to bring her back into the spotlight had stirred the past she had fought so hard to bury. But it was what came next that chilled him. A second message. This time, a video. It was surveillance footage, blurry, black and white. Woman, violin case in hand, quickly guiding a child through a train station. Two men followed a few steps behind, faces obscured but unmistakably tracking her. And then the screen glitched and cut to black. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about forgotten talent anymore. It was about survival. The woman he once thought was simply shy or humble had a secret powerful enough to make her vanish without a trace. And now that secret was pulling him in, note by note, into a story far darker than he ever expected. It all came to a head on the night of the gala. The elite violinist stood backstage, heart pounding harder than before his own performances. The organizers had reluctantly agreed to leave the final slot open, just in case she showed. But no one had seen her in weeks. The crowd was buzzing with expectation, completely unaware of the story unfolding behind the curtains of the woman whose music had once silenced a room full of masters, and of the shadow that had chased her since. The final performance was about to begin. Stage lights dimmed. The announcer cleared his throat. And then movement. A woman stepped into the wings, violin case in hand, a small girl holding her other arm. Her eyes met his, full of fear and resolve. She walked past him with quiet grace, lifted her violin, and stepped onto the stage. Gasps echoed through the hall. The audience didn't recognize her face, but the first note she played stopped time. The music she chose wasn't flashy or famous, it was slow, haunting, filled with aching beauty. A piece almost no one dared attempt, not because it was technically impossible, but because it demanded everything from the soul. She gave it everything by the time she finished. The silence was heavier than applause. The crowd didn't move. Even the organizers looked stunned. The elite violinist found himself standing without realizing, eyes burning. But before anyone could reach her, before the applause could even begin, she turned, took her daughter's hand, and walked off the stage. Not toward the dressing rooms, but straight toward the back exit. He followed, only to find the door wide open. And empty, she was gone. Again, but this time, she left something behind. A letter. Inside was a photograph of her, much younger, standing beside a man holding a violin. On the back, a handwritten note. He was my husband. He made me disappear. But my daughter heard me play it. That gave me the courage to be seen again. The elite violinist sat down, overwhelmed. The truth was clear now. She hadn't just run from a broken past, she had survived it, quietly, through music. Her gift wasn't just talent, it was resilience. Strength in silence. But just as he stood to tell the others, he noticed something else tucked inside the envelope. Folded sheet of music. A brand new composition dot at the top. In delicate script, it read, "For the student who saw the music in me before the world did." And at the bottom, signature, her real name, The Twist. It was a name every classical musician once knew, a prodigy who had vanished over a decade ago after a scandal no one understood. Until now, in the weeks that followed, the music world buzzed with questions. Who was the mystery violinist who played with such raw emotion? Where had she gone? And why did she disappear again just when the spotlight finally found her? But the elite violinist said nothing. He kept her secret out of respect for her past, for her safety, and for the quiet power she had reclaimed. He took the composition she left him and played it. Not on grand stages, but in small rooms, for students and those who listened with their hearts. Word spread, slowly, about a new piece unlike anything anyone had heard before. Musicians whispered about its emotional depth, its haunting beauty. They didn't know the story behind it, but they felt it. He never saw her again, but he did hear from her once more. A small envelope arrived, no return address. Inside was a photo of her daughter, now smiling brightly, holding a violin of her own and a short message. "She's learning like you did." Quietly. The elite violinist smiled. He had chased greatness for so long, thinking it came from fame, applause, and recognition. But in the end, he found it in a quiet corner of the city in a woman who once believed the world had forgotten her. Her story reminded him, and everyone who heard it, that true talent doesn't always seek attention. Sometimes it hides, waiting for the right moment. For safety, for healing, and when it's finally ready to be heard, it doesn't just impress, transforms. Her music lived on, not in headlines, but in hearts. And though she vanished once again, the notes she left behind became a legacy. Not just of a lost violinist, but of a voice that refused to stay silent forever.